The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under the light of 3 different suns. Ships from across the galaxy docked at the enormous space station that orbited Nexus Prime, bringing delegates from every corner of known space. The monthly meeting was about to begin, and representatives from 12 major species were taking their seats in the grand amphitheater. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked quietly through the corridors, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by other ambassadors. She carried a small datapad and wore the tired expression of someone who had learned to expect disappointment. As the human representative, she had grown accustomed to being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as an afterthought. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. Crystalline walls rose in perfect curves, creating natural acoustics that carried every whisper to every corner. 12 sections radiated out from a central speaking platform, each designed to accommodate the specific needs of different species. The Cathera section featured raised platforms for their tall insectoid frames. The Vorthan area included environmental controls for their methane-breathing requirements. The massive Nexari delegates sat in reinforced seats designed to support their rocky, mineral-based bodies. And then there was the human section, a small cluster of simple chairs tucked into what felt like an apologetic corner of the great chamber. 3 years ago, when humanity had first been granted membership in the Galactic Council, Elena had been told this placement was temporary. It never changed. Elena took her seat and activated her translation device. Around her, the conversations of a dozen species created a symphony of clicks, whistles, roars, and electronic tones. She understood most of them now, having spent 3 years learning the subtle ways her colleagues insulted her species when they thought she wasn't listening. The Cathera delegate, Ambassador Zekthal, was speaking to his aide in rapid clicks. "The mammals are here again," he said, his compound eyes glancing toward Elena. "I wonder what impossible request they will make today. Perhaps they want us to stop using their shipping lanes without permission." The Vorthan representative, a gaseous being contained within an environmental suit, pulsed with colors that Elena's translator rendered as laughter. At least they are consistent in their naivety. They still believe that emotional appeals carry weight in galactic politics. Elena had heard variations of these comments for 3 years. She had learned to keep her face neutral, to smile politely, and to present humanity's positions with calm professionalism, even when they were rejected without consideration. The other species saw her restraint as proof of human weakness. They had no idea how much effort it took. The session began with the traditional recitation of galactic law, spoken in the ancient precursor language that predated most current civilizations. Elena followed along with her translator. Though she had memorized the words months ago, the opening ceremonies always reminded the assembled delegates that they were part of something larger than their individual species, something that had maintained peace for over 2,000 years. The first order of business was a trade dispute between the Kythra and a minor species called the Balani. The Balani delegate, a small blue-skinned humanoid, stood nervously as he explained how Cathera mining operations were destroying sacred sites on his homeworld. His voice shook as he pleaded for the council to intervene. Ambassador Zekthal's response was swift and dismissive. The Balani signed the mining contracts willingly. If they were concerned about their spiritual locations, they should have negotiated better terms. The Cathera Confederacy will not break legal agreements because of emotional attachments to rocks and dirt. Elena watched the Balani delegate's shoulders slump in defeat. She had seen this scene played out dozens of times with different species in the victim's role. The powerful took what they wanted from the weak, and the council rubber-stamped their actions with legal technicalities and cold logic. The next item was a boundary dispute between 2 minor powers. Then came complaints about shipping taxes imposed by the Nexari Trade Federation. Each issue was handled with the same clinical efficiency. The strong were affirmed in their strength, the weak were told to accept their weakness, and the galaxy continued to turn. Finally, the council reached the matter that Elena had been waiting for: the crisis in the Outer Rim. For 6 months, the militaristic Kelvani Empire had been expanding into unclaimed space, encountering primitive species who had not yet developed faster than light travel. The Kelvani claimed they were bringing civilization to these worlds, offering protection and advancement in exchange for what they called guided development contracts. Elena knew what those contracts really meant. She had seen the reports from human merchant ships that traveled the outer reaches. The Kelvani were enslaving entire populations, working them to death in mining operations and manufacturing facilities. Whole cultures were being erased in the name of progress. The human delegation wishes to address the Kelvani situation, Elena said when the moderator recognized her. A ripple of what her translator interpreted as amusement passed through the chamber. The Kelvani ambassador, a reptilian being named General Sector, bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. Elena stood and activated her presentation display. Images of destroyed cities and refugee camps filled the air above the central platform. The Kelvani expansion has resulted in the displacement of over 12 million sentient beings. Entire civilizations are being forcibly relocated to work camps. We request immediate council intervention to halt these operations and provide humanitarian aid to the affected populations. General Sector rose from his seat with predatory grace. The human delegation misunderstands the situation, he said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never been seriously challenged. The Kelvani Empire is bringing order to chaotic regions of space. These primitive species were dying from disease, war, and technological limitations. We offer them a chance to contribute to something greater than their small, meaningless existence. By enslaving them, Elena said quietly. By giving them purpose, Sector replied. Something the emotional humans might understand if they possessed the wisdom that comes with true civilization. The chamber erupted in the various species' versions of laughter. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. The Council has a responsibility to protect developing species from exploitation. The Galactic Accords specifically prohibit the enslavement of pre-spaceflight civilizations. The Nexari delegate's voice rumbled like an avalanche. The humans cite law, but they lack the standing to enforce it. The Kelvani Empire has been a member of this council for 800 years. Humanity has been a member for 3. Perhaps the newcomers should observe more and demand less. Elena looked around the chamber at faces that ranged from amused to bored to openly hostile. 3 years of this. 3 years of presenting evidence of atrocities only to be told that humanity lacked the experience, the wisdom, or the strength to have meaningful opinions on galactic affairs. We are not asking to enforce anything ourselves, Elena said, her voice remaining calm despite the fury building in her chest. We are asking the Council to act according to its own laws and principles. Laws and principles, Ambassador Zekthal clicked dismissively, must be balanced against practical realities. The Kelvani provide stability in a chaotic region. Their methods may seem harsh to young species, but effective governance often requires difficult decisions. Elena sat down slowly, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Around her, the Council moved on to other business as if the systematic destruction of entire civilizations was merely an administrative detail. She watched the delegates laugh and negotiate, treating the suffering of millions as an acceptable cost of doing business. She thought about the reports hidden in her personal files. Reports of human refugees who had fled the Kelvani advance. Reports of species that had specifically requested human protection because they had heard rumors of a young race that still remembered what mercy meant. For 3 years, Elena had followed her instructions to be patient, diplomatic, and understanding. For 3 years, she had absorbed insults and dismissals while trying to build relationships with species that saw humanity as a curiosity at best. She wondered how much longer her patience would last. The council session was moving into its 3rd hour when the first emergency transmission arrived. A junior aide rushed into the chamber, his breathing apparatus hissing with urgency as he approached the moderator's platform. Elena watched the exchange with growing dread, recognizing the particular shade of panic that came with truly bad news. Moderator Velnas, an ancient being whose species had held the council leadership for over a millennium, activated the central communication array. We have received an urgent transmission from the Outer Rim Sector 77 Alpha. The message is flagged as priority emergency. The crystal dome above them shimmered and transformed into a massive display screen. Static filled the air for a moment before resolving into a scene that made Elena's blood run cold. A convoy of ships drifted in space, their hulls torn open and bleeding atmosphere into the void. These were not military vessels. Elena recognized them immediately as civilian transports, the kind used to evacuate refugees from war zones. The ships bore the markings of the Terran Protection Service, humanity's small but dedicated refugee assistance program. "This is Captain Morrison of the transport vessel New Hope." A human voice crackled through the speakers, transmission distorted by emergency power systems. "We are under attack by Kelvani forces. Repeat, we are under attack. We are carrying civilian refugees, families with children. We pose no military threat. Requesting immediate assistance." The transmission cut to external camera feeds showing sleek Kelvani warships surrounding the refugee convoy like sharks circling wounded prey. Elena counted at least 8 enemy vessels against 3 unarmed transports. The attack was not random. It was planned. General Sector spoke from his seat without bothering to stand. The convoy was warned not to enter Kelvani-controlled space. They chose to ignore our territorial boundaries. "Those ships are carrying refugees you displaced," Elena said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They are trying to reach the human colonies where they will be safe." "The Kelvani Empire does not recognize human authority over any territory," Sector replied with casual dismissal. "These beings belong to us. They are attempting to steal property of the Kelvani state." Elena shot to her feet. "They are not property. They are sentient beings seeking asylum from your forced labor camps." The transmission resumed, and the scene on the screen became worse. Kelvani fighters were not simply attacking the ships. They were boarding them. Camera feeds from inside the transports showed armored Kelvani soldiers herding families into cargo bays. Children cried as they were separated from their parents. Elderly beings collapsed from fear and exhaustion. But it was not the capture that broke Elena's heart. It was what happened next. The Kelvani soldiers began executing the refugees systematically. Not quickly, not efficiently, but slowly. They made it into entertainment. Elena watched in horror as Kelvani officers laughed while forcing families to watch each other die. They were not simply reclaiming property. They were sending a message. "This transmission is being broadcast across multiple sectors," Moderator Velnas announced in a tone of clinical observation. "The Kelvani forces appear to be ensuring maximum visibility for their actions." Elena looked around the chamber at her fellow delegates. She expected to see shock, anger, disgust. Instead, she saw the same bureaucratic detachment they showed during trade negotiations. The Cathera delegate was reviewing paperwork. The Vorthon representative appeared to be taking notes. The Nexari ambassador was conducting a whispered conversation with his aide. "I call for immediate council intervention," Elena announced, her voice cutting through the chamber's casual indifference. "This is a massacre of civilians under our protection. We have a moral and legal obligation to act." Ambassador Zekthal clicked his mandibles in what Elena had learned was the Cathera equivalent of a sigh. The humans continue to misunderstand the situation. These beings were Kelvani subjects attempting illegal migration. While the methods appear harsh, the Kelvani Empire is within its rights to reclaim its population. "They are executing children," Elena said, her diplomatic training warring with raw fury. "On live broadcast. For entertainment." "Regrettable," rumbled the Nexari delegate, "but not unprecedented. Young species often struggle with the efficient management of subject populations. The Kelvani will learn subtlety with time." Elena stared at him in disbelief. "Subtlety? You think the problem with murdering children is that it lacks subtlety?" The Vorthon representative pulsed with colors that her translator rendered as mild irritation. "Emotional attachment to inferior species is precisely why humanity lacks the maturity for galactic leadership. Effective governance requires difficult decisions that softer species cannot comprehend." On the screen above them, the massacre continued. Elena watched a Kelvani soldier force a mother to choose which of her 2 children would die first. When she refused to choose, he killed both while making her watch. His comrades cheered. "I formally request authorization for human forces to intervene," Elena said, her hands shaking as she fought to keep her voice professional. "Denied," Moderator Velnas replied without hesitation. "Humanity lacks the military capacity for meaningful intervention in this matter." "Then authorize someone else," Elena shouted, abandoning diplomacy entirely.
"Send the Nexari fleet."
"Send Cathera battle groups. Send anyone!" "The cost would be enormous," Zekthal clicked dismissively. "Kelvani space is heavily defended. Any intervention would result in significant casualties among council forces. The strategic value of these primitive refugees does not justify such expenditure." Elena felt something snap inside her chest. 3 years of patience, 3 years of diplomatic restraint, 3 years of watching atrocities while being told that humanity was too young, too weak, too emotional to understand how the galaxy really worked. Then authorize us to defend them ourselves, she said quietly. General Sector's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. The humans are welcome to try. Perhaps a demonstration of reality will cure them of their naive idealism. The Kelvani Empire would be delighted to provide educational services to the newest members of the galactic community. The laughter spread through the chamber. Elena heard clicks, whistles, and rumbles of amusement from species that found the idea of human military intervention hilarious. They had seen humanity's ships, small, simple vessels used for exploration and trade. They had reviewed humanity's military records, finding nothing but small conflicts with pirates and border disputes. They thought they knew what humanity was capable of. Elena walked slowly to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. The transmission from the refugee convoy continued to play above them, the sounds of dying families providing a soundtrack to the council's indifference. She looked up at each delegate in turn, memorizing their faces. The amused superiority of the Cathara, the cold calculation of the Vorthon, the dismissive arrogance of the Nexari, the predatory satisfaction of the Kelvani. For 3 years, these beings had treated humanity like children playing at galactic politics. They had mocked human emotion, dismissed human concerns, and ignored human suffering. They had called mercy a weakness and compassion a flaw. Elena activated her personal communicator, speaking in clear, calm English that her translator would carry to every species in the chamber. Admiral Chen, this is Ambassador Vasquez. You are authorized to deploy the actual fleet. All restrictions are lifted. You have 30 minutes to end the Kelvani assault on our refugees, or we will end it for them. The chamber fell silent except for the continuing transmission from the dying convoy. General Sector recovered first, his laughter returning with renewed vigor. The humans threaten us with their exploration ships and research vessels. Perhaps they will defeat us with superior map-making. Elena turned to face him directly, and something in her expression made his laughter die. For 3 years, she said in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber, humanity has operated under the restrictions placed upon us by this council. We have honored every treaty, followed every regulation, and accepted every limitation you imposed. We have done this not because we had to, but because we hoped you were worthy of our patience. She paused, letting her words sink in. You have 30 minutes to prove that hope was not misplaced. After that, you will discover exactly why a species that climbed to the top of a death world's food chain might have been holding back. The silence that followed was broken, only by the screams of dying children from the transmission above. Elena returned to her seat and began, counting down the minutes, watching the faces around her transform from amusement to confusion, to the first glimmers of something that might have been fear. For several minutes after Elena's ultimatum, the council chamber remained trapped in stunned silence. The only sounds came from the ongoing transmission showing the massacre of human-protected refugees. The delegates seemed frozen, unsure whether to treat Elena's threat as a diplomatic bluff or something more serious. The first sign that something had changed came from the Nexari delegate's personal aide, a smaller being whose job was to monitor galactic communication networks. He approached his superior with obvious agitation, his rocky features displaying what Elena recognized as deep concern. Ambassador Tuckmore, the aide whispered in tones loud enough for the chamber's acoustics to carry. We are detecting unusual energy signatures throughout human space. Our monitoring stations are registering massive power fluctuations from ships and installations we had cataloged as civilian infrastructure. Ambassador, Tuckmore's response rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Elaborate. The human vessels we identified as exploration ships are showing energy outputs consistent with military dreadnoughts. Their mining stations are activating what appear to be defensive weapon systems. Sir, these signatures suggest capabilities far beyond what humanity has declared to the Council. Elena watched the confusion spread across the faces around her. 3 years of careful intelligence gathering, 3 years of monitoring human activities, 3 years of confident assumptions about humanity's limitations were suddenly being called into question. General Sector activated his own communication device, speaking in rapid Kelvani to his military advisors. Elena's translator caught fragments of the conversation. Verify, impossible, and how did we miss this? The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Chen's voice suddenly filled the chamber, broadcasting on frequencies that should have been impossible for any single ship to access simultaneously. The fact that he was speaking to the entire Galactic Council through their most secure communication channels was itself a demonstration of capability that shouldn't have existed. Council members, Admiral Chen said in a tone of absolute calm, you are about to witness the deployment of humanity's actual military assets. For 3 years, we have operated under the restrictions placed upon us by galactic law, using ships that represent approximately 0.3% of our true defensive capabilities. The chamber erupted in disbelief. Ambassador Zektal's clicks became rapid and agitated as he processed the implications. The Vorthan representative's colors shifted to patterns Elena's translator identified as shock and confusion. You have 27 minutes remaining, Admiral Chen continued, to end the Kelvani assault on civilians under our protection. After that time expires, we will consider the Kelvani Empire to be in a state of active war with humanity, and will respond accordingly. Impossible, General Sector roared, rising from his seat. Our intelligence networks would have detected major military installations. We have monitored human space for years. Elena stood slowly, feeling a calm she hadn't experienced in months settling over her. The fear, the anger, the helpless frustration that had been building for 3 years were being replaced by something much more dangerous. Certainty. You monitored what we allowed you to see, she said simply. Every treaty you forced us to sign, every inspection you demanded, every restriction you placed on our activities, we honored them precisely. You required us to declare all military vessels above a certain tonnage. We complied by building our warships below that threshold, and then linking them into larger formations. You demanded inspection of our weapon systems. We complied by disguising our weapons as mining equipment and industrial tools. You insisted on monitoring our ship movements. We complied by using vessels you would classify as civilian transports. The truth was sinking in around the chamber like a cold tide. Elena could see the delegates frantically reviewing their intelligence files, looking for clues they had missed, signs they had ignored. You never asked about our defensive doctrines because you assumed we had none worth mentioning, Elena continued. You never asked about our manufacturing capacity because you assumed it was primitive. You never asked what humanity did during the century before first contact because you assumed it was irrelevant barbarism. She walked to the center of the chamber again, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly still air. You never asked the right questions because you never imagined we might be anything other than what we appeared to be. The Nexari aide returned to his superior with updated information, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustic chamber. Sir, our deep space sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the outer rim. Ships are emerging from what appears to be hyperspace, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The vessels are enormous. Elena checked her chronometer. 23 minutes remaining. Admiral Chen, she said into her communicator, please provide our council colleagues with a visual demonstration of humanity's actual capabilities. The transmission from the refugee convoy suddenly switched to external sensors, showing the space around the massacre. For a moment, nothing appeared to have changed. The Kelvani warships continued their systematic slaughter while their fighters prevented any escape. Then space itself seemed to fold. Where there had been empty vacuum, a ship appeared. Not through the familiar flash of hyperspace arrival, but through a gradual materialization that suggested technology the Council had never encountered. The vessel was massive, dwarfing even the largest Kelvani dreadnought like a mountain rising above a pebble. But it was not just the size that brought gasps from the assembled delegates. It was the design. Where Kelvani ships were angular and aggressive, where Nexari vessels were blocky and industrial, where Kithara ships were elegantly curved, the human warship appeared to be carved from a single piece of some impossible material. Its surface seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to focus on directly. The UHSV Righteous Fury, Admiral Chen's voice announced, accompanied by Battle Group 7 of the Terran Defense Fleet. More ships materialized around the first, smaller vessels that were still larger than anything the Kelvani had deployed. Elena counted 12, then 20, then stopped counting as the space around the refugee convoy filled with human warships that had appeared from nowhere. General Sector's communication with his commanders had become frantic. Elena's translator was struggling to keep up with the rapid Kelvani speech, but she caught words like impossible, where did they come from, and retreat. 18 minutes remaining, Elena announced to the chamber. The lead human ship began broadcasting on all frequencies, its message reaching every corner of Kelvani space. Kelvani forces, you are engaged in the massacre of civilians under the protection of the Terran Federation. You have 17 minutes to cease hostilities and withdraw to a minimum distance of 10,000 kilometers from the refugee convoy. Failure to comply will result in the total destruction of your fleet. General Sector activated his own communication system, trying to rally his forces. This is General Sector to all Kelvani commanders. Do not be intimidated by human tricks. Their ships may be large, but size means nothing without firepower. Destroy the human vessels and continue the operation. The response from the Kelvani fleet commander was immediate and filled with panic. General, our sensors cannot get accurate readings on the human ships. They appear to be using some form of stealth technology that interferes with targeting systems. Sir, we cannot lock weapons on them. Then fire anyway, Sector commanded. Blanket the area with ordnance. Elena watched the transmission as Kelvani ships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, plasma cannons, and projectile weapons filled the space around the human fleet, with a display of firepower that should have been overwhelming. Nothing happened. The human ship sat motionless, in space as the Kelvani barrage struck them and simply disappeared. No explosions, no damage, no response at all. The weapons fire seemed to be absorbed by the strange dark hulls, as if the ships were made of some impossible material that converted energy attacks into harmless light. 15 minutes, Elena said quietly. The lead human ship moved forward with a grace that defied physics. Something that massive should not have been able to maneuver like a fighter craft, but it slipped between the Kelvani vessels with fluid precision. Its movement was predatory, purposeful, and absolutely terrifying. Kelvani forces, the human ship broadcast. You have failed to comply with our demand to cease hostilities. We are now authorized to use minimum necessary force to protect civilian lives. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ship did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, it projected what appeared to be a focused gravitational field. The nearest Kelvani dreadnought, a massive vessel that had been in service for over a century, simply came apart. Not exploded, not destroyed, but disassembled at the molecular level, as its own structural bonds were overcome by impossible forces. The crew had time for exactly one scream before their ship ceased to exist. General, Sector stared at the transmission in complete silence, his predatory confidence replaced by something Elena had never seen on a Kelvani face before. Pure, absolute terror. 14 minutes remaining, Elena announced to the chamber. Around her, the council, the silence that followed the destruction of the first Kelvani dreadnought, was deafening. The council chamber had become a tomb of stunned disbelief as delegates struggled to process what they had just witnessed. A ship that had been in service for over a century, that had conquered dozens of worlds, had been reduced to its component atoms in less than 3 seconds. General Sector's hands shook as he activated his communicator again. All Kelvani forces, this is General Sector. Execute immediate tactical withdrawal. I repeat, withdraw from engagement. The response from his fleet commander was barely coherent. Sir, we are trying to withdraw, but the human ships are matching our every movement. They appear to be anticipating our maneuvers before we execute them. Elena watched the tactical display as the remaining Kelvani vessels attempted to flee. They moved in standard military formations using proven escape patterns that had served them well in countless conflicts. But the human ships moved to intercept them before they had even begun their maneuvers, as if they were reading the Kelvani commanders' minds. 12 minutes remaining, Elena announced. Admiral Chen's voice filled the chamber again, calm and precise. Kelvani forces have failed to cease hostile action against civilian targets. We are escalating to moderate force deployment. The second human ship moved forward, and Elena realized that the council was about to receive a comprehensive education in just how far behind their technology truly was. This vessel projected not gravitational fields, but something that appeared to manipulate energy itself. The nearest Kelvani cruiser simply stopped working. Its engines went cold, its weapons powered down, its life support systems failed. The ship became a dead hulk drifting in space, its crew trapped inside a vessel that had forgotten how to function. But the humans were not done demonstrating their capabilities. A third ship approached the disabled cruiser and projected what appeared to be a boarding tunnel made of pure energy. Human soldiers moved through this impossible construct and within minutes were broadcasting surrender demands to the Kelvani crew. "This is Commander Rodriguez of the Terran Marine Corps," a human voice announced. "You are hereby under arrest for crimes against civilian populations. You will surrender your weapons and submit to processing for war crimes tribunals." The response from the Kelvani crew was immediate and desperate. "We surrender! We surrender! Please don't kill us!" Elena noted the irony. For the first time in recorded history, Kelvani soldiers were begging for mercy. Ambassador Zekthal finally found his voice, his clicks rapid and panicked. "This is impossible. No species developed such advanced technology in isolation. Where did humanity acquire these capabilities?" Elena turned to face him with a smile that held no warmth. "We developed them ourselves, during the period you dismissed as primitive barbarism. During the century before first contact, when humanity was allegedly struggling with basic spaceflight. The implications were staggering. The Kithara had based their entire assessment of human capabilities on the assumption that humanity had only recently achieved interstellar travel. If humans had been spacefaring for longer than anyone realized, if they had spent decades developing military technology in secret. "You lied to us," rumbled Ambassador Tuckmore, his rocky features displaying what Elena recognized as dawning horror. "We told you exactly what you asked for," Elena replied. "When you asked about our recent achievements, we told you about our recent achievements. When you asked about our current ship classes, we showed you our current ship classes. When you asked about our military conflicts, we described our military conflicts. We never lied. We simply didn't volunteer information you never asked for." The truth was elegant in its simplicity. Every intelligence assessment, every strategic analysis, every diplomatic evaluation had been based on incomplete information because the Council had never imagined they needed to ask the right questions. They had assumed human limitations based on human behavior, never considering that the behavior itself might be deliberate misdirection. 10 minutes remaining, Elena announced, on the tactical display. The situation was rapidly deteriorating for the Kelvani forces. Their ships were being systematically disabled, their crews captured, their weapons neutralized. But the humans were not simply winning a battle. They were conducting what appeared to be a coordinated rescue operation. Additional human ships had arrived at the refugee convoy, vessels Elena had never seen before. These were not warships but medical ships, evacuation transports, and what appeared to be mobile hospitals. They moved with the same impossible grace as the combat vessels, sliding between the wreckage of the battle to reach the damaged refugee transports. "This is the hospital ship New Mercy," a human voice announced. "We are commencing emergency medical operations for all survivors regardless of species. Kelvani wounded will receive the same treatment as refugee casualties." Elena watched General Sector's expression change from terror to confusion. "They are treating our wounded?" "That's what humans do," Elena said simply. "We save everyone we can, even our enemies." The rescue operation was a masterpiece of coordination and compassion. Human medical teams moved through the damaged refugee ships, treating injuries, comforting families, and evacuating the most seriously wounded to advanced medical facilities. At the same time, they were doing the same for Kelvani survivors, pulling injured enemy soldiers from destroyed ships and providing them with immediate medical care. 7 minutes remaining, Elena announced, but the demonstration was far from over. Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Chen. "Ambassador, we are receiving reports of Kelvani military activity in 17 other systems. It appears they have similar operations underway against civilian populations." Elena looked directly at General Sector. "Admiral, please provide humanitarian assistance to all affected systems." "Acknowledged, Ambassador. Battle groups 3 through 9 are moving to intercept." The tactical display expanded to show star maps across multiple sectors. Elena watched as human ships appeared in system after system, moving with impossible speed and coordination. They were not simply responding to the immediate crisis. but addressing the entire network of Kelvani oppression simultaneously. This is impossible, Ambassador Zekthal clicked frantically. No species has the logistics capability to coordinate military operations across 17 star systems simultaneously. No species you know about, Elena corrected. You have spent 3 years studying what we wanted you to see while ignoring what was happening in the spaces between your monitoring stations. The truth was becoming clear. Humanity had not been isolated during their development. They had been preparing. Every human colony, every trade route, every exploration mission had been part of a vast network of hidden infrastructure designed to support exactly this kind of operation. 5 minutes remaining, Elena announced. The Kelvani resistance was collapsing across all fronts, not because they lacked courage or firepower, but because they were fighting an enemy that had planned for this moment for decades. Every Kelvani tactic had been anticipated, every strategy countered, every possible response prepared for in advance. But Elena realized that the most devastating part of the demonstration was not the display of overwhelming force. It was the display of overwhelming mercy. In every system where human forces engaged Kelvani ships, the pattern was the same. Military targets were disabled, not destroyed. Crews were captured, not killed. Wounded enemies received immediate medical attention. Civilian populations were protected regardless of their species or political affiliation. This is what restrained force looks like, Elena announced to the chamber. This is what we have been trying to tell you for 3 years. Power without wisdom is tyranny. Strength without mercy is barbarism. We have the capability to delete the Kelvani Empire from existence in approximately 15 minutes. Instead, we are choosing to save as many lives as possible while stopping their aggression. General Sector stared at the displays showing his empire's military being systematically dismantled with surgical precision. Why, he whispered. We would have shown you no such mercy. Elena looked at him with something that might have been pity. That's the difference between us. 3 minutes remaining, she announced. But Elena realized that for the first time since the crisis began, she was not counting down to an escalation of violence. She was counting down to its end. The 30-minute countdown reached 0 not with explosions or destruction, but with silence. Across 17 star systems, Kelvani military operations had simply stopped. Not through annihilation, but through what Elena realized was the most sophisticated rescue operation in galactic history. The tactical displays showed the results with stark clarity. Every Kelvani fleet had been disabled. Every civilian population that had been under attack was now under human protection. Every refugee camp, every slave labor facility, every forced relocation center was being liberated by human forces who moved with the precision of a plan that had been decades in the making. But perhaps most importantly, casualty reports were flooding in from across the affected systems. Of the 847 Kelvani vessels that had been engaged, 822 had been captured intact with their crews alive. Of the approximately 15,000 Kelvani military personnel involved in the operations, fewer than 200 had been killed, and most of those had died in the initial engagement before their commanders realized the futility of resistance. Elena stood in the center of the council chamber, watching her colleagues grapple with a new reality that none of them had imagined possible. The small, emotional, naive species they had dismissed for 3 years had just demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed the combined fleets of the entire Galactic Council, and they had used that overwhelming power to save lives rather than take them. The immediate crisis has been resolved, Elena announced. Human forces have secured all affected systems and are providing humanitarian aid to displaced populations. Kelvani military personnel who surrendered are being held in comfortable detention facilities pending war crimes tribunals. Kelvani civilians in the affected systems are under human protection and are free to return to their homes or relocate as they choose. General Sector sat slumped in his chair, staring at the displays that showed his empire's expansion permanently halted. 17 systems, he whispered. You took 17 systems in 30 minutes. We liberated 17 systems, Elena corrected. The populations are free to govern themselves, request council protection, or petition for human guardianship. We are not interested in conquest. We are interested in ending oppression. Ambassador Zekthal's clicks had become slow and measured. the sound of someone whose entire worldview was collapsing. The implications are staggering. If humanity possesses such capabilities, why did you submit to council restrictions? Why did you accept junior status in galactic affairs? Elena's smile was sad but genuine. Because we hoped you were better than this. For 3 years we gave you every opportunity to prove that the galactic community was guided by justice, compassion, and wisdom. We wanted to believe that species who had achieved interstellar civilization had also achieved moral advancement. She looked around the chamber at faces that displayed various mixtures of fear, confusion, and dawning understanding. We were wrong. The Vorthon representative's colors shifted to patterns Elena's translator identified as shame and regret. What you witnessed today was the Council operating according to established precedent. Powerful species have always dominated weaker ones. It is the natural order. No, Elena said firmly. It is the old order. Today, you have seen what the new order looks like. Admiral Chen's voice filled the chamber again, calm and professional. Council members, you should be aware that human forces are now providing security and humanitarian assistance to 847 worlds that were previously subject to various forms of oppression, exploitation, or neglect by Council member species. This is not an occupation. This is a protection service offered to any species that requests it. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Elena watched as delegates frantically consulted their personal communicators, checking reports from their own territories. The pattern was consistent across the galaxy. Human ships had appeared at worlds where the local populations were suffering under the rule of more powerful species, offering protection, medical aid, and technological assistance. Not conquest. Liberation. Ambassador Takmor's voice rumbled with barely controlled panic. You cannot simply declare council authority void and substitute your own judgment. We are not declaring anything void, Elena replied. We are offering an alternative. Any species that wishes to remain under council governance is free to do so. Any species that prefers human protection is free to request it. We are not forcing anyone to make a choice. But even as she spoke, Elena's communicator was receiving a steady stream of messages, requests for protection from dozens of minor species who had heard about the human intervention, offers of alliance from worlds that had been quietly suffering under the current galactic order, reports of celebrations on planets where human ships had appeared to end centuries of oppression. The galaxy was choosing, and the choices were becoming clear. Moderator Velnas finally spoke, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia of galactic governance. What you have done today changes everything. The balance of power that has maintained peace for 2,000 years no longer exists. Elena nodded slowly. You're right. The balance of power no longer exists. What exists now is the presence of power guided by principles that place the welfare of innocent beings above the convenience of their rulers. She walked back to her small section of the chamber, the apologetic corner that no longer seemed quite so apologetic. For 3 years I have sat in this corner and listened to you debate the fate of civilizations as if you were discussing trade routes. I have watched you enable atrocities through bureaucratic indifference and justify oppression through legal technicalities. I have seen you treat mercy as weakness and compassion as naivety. Elena took her seat, but now every eye in the chamber was focused on her with an attention that bordered on fear. Today, you learned that our mercy was a choice, not a limitation. Our patience was a gift, not a requirement. Our restraint was policy, not inability. General Sector spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Elena's response was calm and matter-of-fact. Now you have decisions to make. You can continue governing as you always have, using force and fear to maintain control over species too weak to resist you. You can treat beings like property and justify suffering as necessity. You can maintain the old order where might makes right, and the strong prey upon the weak. She paused, letting her words sink in. But if you make those choices, you will do so knowing that there is an alternative. Every species you oppress will know that protection is available. Every world you exploit will know that they have options. Every being you harm will know that someone is watching who possesses both the power and the will to intervene. The silence that followed was profound. Elena realized that she was witnessing the end of an era. The galactic order that had existed for millennia was not being destroyed by war or revolution, but by the simple presence of a better option. Ambassador Zekthal was the first to break the silence. "What do you want from us?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I want you to be worthy of the power you wield. I want you to remember that governance is a responsibility, not a privilege. I want you to treat every sentient being with the dignity they deserve simply by virtue of existing." She looked around the chamber one final time. "But mostly, I want you to understand that the age of unopposed tyranny is over. The galaxy is watching now, and the galaxy has a choice. Make yourselves worthy of their loyalty, or accept that they will find protectors who are." The council session ended not with a formal adjournment, but with delegates quietly filing out of the chamber, each carrying the weight of a universe that had fundamentally changed in the span of 30 minutes. Elena remained in her seat, watching the empty chamber and thinking about the messages still flooding her communicator. Tomorrow there would be new negotiations, new alliances, and new challenges. Tomorrow the work of building a better galaxy would begin in earnest. But today, Mercy had finally found teeth, and the galaxy would never be the same.